Welcome back to another Explainer. Today, we're diving into something absolutely fascinating, human geography. It's basically the story of us. We're going to look at the very fabric of our species, where exactly we live, why on Earth we choose to live there, and how our numbers are constantly shifting across the globe.
Okay, let's just dive right into this with a totally wild number, 90%. I know, it sounds completely counterintuitive, but it's an actual geographic fact. Broadly speaking, 90% of the global population lives on just 10% of the Earth's land area. Just think about that incredible unevenness for a second. We are a highly clustered species.
But before we get bogged down in all the heavy data, let's anchor our stats in a much more human philosophy. Ralph Waldo Emerson famously noted, "Not gold, but only women and men can make a people great and strong." And I just love that. It's such a vital reminder that a country's true wealth, it isn't its borders or its mineral deposits, it's the people. We are the actual resources who use everything else and decide the future.
So here's our roadmap for the next few minutes. We'll be looking at where do we live, why do we live there, how populations actually change, the push and pull of migration, and finally, the demographic transition. Let's get into it.
Section 1, where do we live?
Honestly, the sheer concentration of humanity is staggering. Get this, the 10 most populous countries in the world make up about 60% of the entire global population. And 6 of those 10 massive populations, they're located right here in Asia. It's a perfect illustration of this idea that Asia has many places where people are few, and just a handful of places where people are very many.
So to really wrap our heads around this unevenness, we rely on a metric called population density. It's pretty straightforward, just the ratio between the number of people and the size of the land they occupy. You just take the total population and divide it by the area. Think of it kind of like how crowded a room feels depending on its square footage, right? 100 people in a massive warehouse, plenty of space. But 100 people in a tiny living room, yeah, you're definitely bumping elbows. That is exactly how we measure persons per square kilometer.
Which brings us to Section 2, why we live there.
Okay, so why do we cluster in certain living rooms and completely avoid the warehouses? Well, it all starts with those base-level geographical factors. We're naturally drawn to fresh water in river valleys, right? We need it for drinking and agriculture. We also prefer flat plains like the incredibly crowded Ganga Plains over something like the scarcely populated Himalayas, simply because flatland is way easier to farm and build roads on. Add in a comfortable, moderate climate and some fertile, loamy soil, and boom, you've got the absolute perfect foundation for a massive population.
But of course, we don't just farm anymore. Economic drivers quickly take over. Mineral deposits act like these giant magnets. Take the Katanga-Zambia copper belt in Africa, for instance. It attracts thousands because mining brings steady employment. Then you have urbanization. People flock to cities because they offer better jobs, better medical facilities, and way better transport. And finally, industrialization creates these massive employment hubs. A great example is the Kobe, Osaka region in Japan. It's thickly populated, not just with factory workers, but with shopkeepers, bank employees, and doctors who all move there to support that huge industry.
And this brilliantly illustrates what happens when those economic factors kick into high gear. The physical results are just dramatic. This kind of intense density is the direct result of urbanization and industrialization acting as massive magnets for workers who are just seeking a better life.
Now, beyond geography and economics, social and cultural factors also play a really huge role. Deep religious significance can attract literally millions of people to a single city. But on the flip side, things like social and political unrest, that will rapidly empty out perfectly habitable land. Sometimes governments even step in and offer incentives to deliberately resettle populations, moving people away from overcrowded cities and out into empty frontiers.
All right, moving right along to Section 3, how populations actually change.
To really understand the mechanics of how a population shifts, imagine a giant collective bucket. The first component adding water to that bucket is birth, and we measure this using something called the crude birth rate. It's simple. It's just the number of live births in a year per 1,000 people in the population. On the other side of the equation, we have the drain. That's the crude death rate, or CDR. This is the number of deaths in a particular year per 1,000 people. Now, here is an absolutely crucial takeaway. Massive population growth isn't just caused by high birth rates. It's actually deeply affected by decreasing death rates. When societies make economic and social advancements in things like healthcare and sanitation, fewer people die and the population naturally swells.
So when we actually do the math, we get a few different types of growth. Natural growth is your most basic formula, births minus deaths. Simple. But actual growth is a bit closer to reality because it factors in human movement. That formula is births minus deaths plus in-migration minus out-migration. If your final number goes up, well, you have positive growth. But if deaths exceed births, or if a huge number of people emigrate away, you're looking at negative growth.
Section 4. The push and pull. So migration is that third major component of population change we just mentioned. When people migrate, they leave their place of origin and they arrive at their destination. And ultimately, this is a spontaneous, very human effort to achieve a better balance between population and resources. You know, it's kind of a fascinating quirk about this whole process. The exact same person is considered an emigrant when they leave and an immigrant when they arrive.
But why do people actually pack up their entire lives and move? It's really a battle of push versus pull. Clearly contrasting these two forces makes it super easy to understand. Push factors are negative. They literally push you away from your home. We're talking things like unemployment, poor living conditions, political turmoil, or even epidemics. Pull factors, on the other hand, are those shiny positive opportunities that pull you in. Think better jobs, better living conditions, peace, stability, and security. Basically, people migrate to escape the push and grab hold of the pull.
And that brings us to Section 5, the demographic transition.
Let's move to our final framework and see how this all builds. The demographic transition theory actually maps out the fascinating journey a society takes from being rural and agrarian to becoming urban and industrial. It happens across 3 stages. In stage 1, you have high births but also high deaths due to things like disease, so overall growth is pretty slow. But then, in stage 2, improvements in health and sanitation cause deaths to drop rapidly, but births stay high. This triggers a massive population boom. Finally, in stage 3, society becomes fully urbanized and industrial. Both births and deaths drop, and the population slowly stabilizes.
And these aren't just historical phases from the past, they are literally happening across the globe right now. For example, rainforest tribes are currently in stage 1 with high fertility and high mortality. Countries like Peru, Sri Lanka, and Kenya are expanding rapidly in stage 2. Meanwhile, highly industrialized nations like Canada, Japan, and the US have reached stage 3. It really proves that human beings are just incredibly adaptable, right? We deliberately adjust our family size as our society progresses.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound geographic question. Way back in 1798, a thinker named Thomas Malthus warned that human populations would always grow faster than our food supply. He thought it would inevitably lead to a crash caused by famine or disease. Today, we obviously know that preventive measures, like family planning and education, are absolutely vital. So I'm going to leave you with this. As our world continues to evolve, can humanity deliberately control its rapid increase to ensure the long-term sustainability of our resources? It really is the ultimate question for our future. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep on learning.